Hi, I'm Vanessa Vicaria, aka The Math Guru, and you're listening to Math Therapy, a podcast that explores the root causes of math trauma and the empowering ways we can heal from it. Whether you think you're a math person or not, you're about to find out that math people don't actually exist, but the scars that math class left on many of us definitely do. Oh, and don't worry, no calculators or actual math were involved in the making of this podcast. Okay, so the fans have been asking, who is this David and how does he put up with you? And if you're not a longtime listener, you might be like, who is David? And David, guys, is our producer. Like, you hear him in episodes, he'll pipe up when I'm talking too loud, or my bracelets are jingling, or when I say something that might get me canceled. He's the man behind Math Therapy, and I thought it was time to get him on the podcast. This conversation was wild. We talked about Joe Rogan. We talked about how math education has been weaponized. We talked about what David, who is not an educator, really thinks about the math wars. Most importantly, though, we talked about my new book for like 2 minutes. If you haven't heard, it's called Math Therapy. It came out on September 2nd, Keanu Reeves' 60th birthday, and it's finally available for order. If you head to maththerapy.com, it's a book for teachers on how to help every single student heal their math trauma in their classroom. Anyways, you're not here for that. You are here for David, just like I am. So without further ado, let's get to it. Okay, guys, I know the fans of the pod have always wondered about the man, the mystery, the legend, the Wizard of Oz, the Wizard of Math Therapy, David Kochberg. He is our producer. He's my longtime bestie. He's my ex-boyfriend. We're in a band together. And I know that you guys are wondering, how do you make it work? What is it like? What is it like behind the scenes? So I thought I would interview David. And that's what we're going to do today. So, David, welcome to the podcast.
Vanessa, it is a delight and an honor to be here.
I just want you guys to know that before we started even recording, David started having a full panic because he's like, well, I don't know what to do. I'm not in control. I can't see the waveform on the screen. And you know, I think that's a really good segue into what is it like with us working together, working with somebody, David, you yourself, who is such a perfectionist, so detail oriented, and you having me to produce who is so not detail oriented. What has it been like? Let's start there.
It has been a learning curve, but as you clearly and in great detail explained our entire history together, we have gone through a lot together, so I know you very well, and I know how to work with you. We'll have our little spats. We'll have our little
What do we fight about?
Disagreements.
Like about what? What are we disagreeing about during the making of the podcast? Run the fans through it.
Well, we have opposing forms of anxiety that both annoy and compound on each other's.
Sure.
So it's just a matter of us just going through those motions before each recording session. I get anxious about, is it going to sound good? Is the room going to be too echoey? Is there going to be some noise from outside that the mic's going to pick up? What's the lighting? All this stuff. You're sitting there freaking out about all the questions that you're going to ask, or you don't even know what questions to ask, but you've written 1,000 questions. And then when we get to the interview, you don't ask any of them. You then just end up chit-chatting and shooting the shit with the guest.
First swear word on the podcast episode, and it is from David Kochberg.
Wow.
Okay, so that's really, really good to know. Thank you so much. I mean, I think what's really interesting is you get roped into this podcast. Can you take yourself back to when we started this, which I think was 2020, first season, 4 years ago, what you were thinking when I was like, I want you to produce a podcast called Math Therapy? Like what? And I ask this because you are not a math teacher, right? You're not a math educator. You're an engineer, so you're kind of in STEM.
Yes.
But very different than being in the education world. What were you thinking at that time about what the podcast was going to be about? And like, did you care? Like, were you like, whatever, and like, I'll just produce something? Or were you interested in the idea of math therapy?
Well, to be precise, I came aboard after you had already recorded the first season's interviews.
What? Who produced it?
Well, you and Sabina started the podcast and you had recorded all of these episodes. And then you needed someone to edit them and turn them into a podcast.
Okay.
So then I wasn't involved in the very early germination of the seed. Is that a right analogy?
Obviously, I'm not going to know. So, so when you start editing these episodes, what are you thinking? Like you're hearing these stories, what's going on?
From a technical standpoint, I was curious about just how does one edit a podcast? And then because we are in a band together and over the years I've gotten into a lot of the production, I have learned a lot about audio editing and mixing and stuff like that. So then that's why I thought, well, maybe I can try editing this podcast. And I edited all those episodes and it was a lot of fun.
But what did you think of what you were hearing, the content, like these stories about math anxiety? Like, were you kind of like, were you interested or were you just like, I'm just editing this girl like yammering on?
Well, I'm quite used to you yammering on.
Right.
Just in general day-to-day life.
Sure.
And when you yammer, you are very interesting and insightful. And coming from a STEM background myself, I found the conversations interesting. And on that first season and on subsequent seasons since, you always have quite a wide variety of guests from all these different backgrounds, like some people who have math anxiety, some people who are doing the same kind of work that you are. And it is interesting talking about education. So,
you know what? I'm curious for you to just actually tell us a bit about your history with math. Like, what is your math history like? I mean, we obviously talk about math trauma on the podcast all the time. Would you say you ever had any math anxiety yourself or have experienced any math trauma yourself?
You know what? As a matter of fact, I do recall a specific instance.
You do?
Yeah.
But you were always good at math, right?
Well, so this is interesting because yes, I think I always had an aptitude for it in elementary school. But in elementary school, like I didn't do very well in that school for various reasons. And then for high school, I went to a gifted school, which is never a fun thing to say out loud, but alas. But however, it balances out by the rest of the story because I came in there thinking like, oh, I'm gifted. I'm really good at everything.
And this is why we don't label students, everyone. Go on.
Anti-labels. If there's one thing I've learned from listening to hundreds of math therapy interviews is that labels are very damaging.
Okay, but go on.
So I rolled into the first day of class there thinking, oh, I'm so advanced and I'm ahead of the curve and I'm so good at math and blah, blah, blah. And I think I discovered that everyone else in that class was way further ahead of the curve than me.
Really?
And I remember the first day of school going to math class and the teacher starts doing this exercise. He's just shouting out numbers and he's like 5 plus 2 times 7 minus 3 divided by 7. And he's going on. And it's like a kind of brain test for everyone.
I'm getting anxiety.
Yeah. So then I got anxiety. And after like a few numbers, I'm like, I can't keep track of all this stuff. And he goes on for like a minute. And then a few of the people in the class got it. And then they start going through the actual curriculum. And then they're like going through all of this stuff that I've never seen before. And all these other people are getting it. And then also it was the kind of school where I think you could move ahead grade levels if you were advanced. So then there's kids who's like 3 years younger than me who know more stuff than me. And so I remember like getting home that night and my parents are all like excited about me going to this new school that we were both excited about and me being challenged. And I'm like in tears because I feel like I'm so far behind all of these other kids. And all of a sudden I thought I was so smart because I get into this gifted school and actually I don't know anything and I feel like I was hopeless. So I do remember that initial shock of math trauma.
It's funny because like, okay, first of all, I never knew that story. And I'm thinking about how many different things there are in there that I'm like, oh my God. So yeah, using timed, quick, frantic ways to measure understanding. Number 2, being labeled. Number 3, comparing yourself to everyone. Like these are things that can cause math trauma, right? Like there's just like a whole bunch of them. And just this idea of like you leaving there feeling like you're so much less than. Did that stick with you? How did you move on from that moment? Like where was there a shift?
That is a good question. I don't really know because...
Like, did your parents say anything to you? Like, did someone like...
Well, I think it was a matter of like, hey, this is the first day. Let's give it a little bit of time. Like, there's going to be a transition period, and this was a very different school. And I guess that's something I've always related to your story that you always tell about your academic journey and how you didn't fit in at the quote unquote regular school, and then when you went to an alternative school, you were able to find yourself academically more. And so that is what happened to me at this school, kind of the identical story, where in previous schools I had not really fit in and I hadn't felt challenged, or there wasn't the same kind of attention, or it just didn't work for me for whatever reasons. But then at this school, I did end up and it was a much smaller school. They were small classes, so we got to know our teachers really well, and there was so much one-on-one. So I think those kinds of things are actually a parallel between our high school journeys. And so I think just initially, that initial shock was a turning point, and then we just were like, let's not panic, let's not jump to conclusions too quickly, let's give it a bit of time. And then over time I did get into it, and I was able to catch up to everyone. And then at that school, yeah, like we would do all those Euclid or whatever tests, like do they
the
still
math
have
contests?
those?
Yeah, they still have those.
Yeah, so they still had those, and then I started to really enjoy those because those were very problem-solving oriented, and I came to excel at math and science and really enjoy it. And then that's why I ended up going into engineering for my bachelor's.
Well, for those of you who don't know, no joke, and I'm not just saying this, David is probably the best problem solver I know. Not that there's like a best way to be a problem solver, but like it's actually incredible to watch you, because literally any problem, whether it's figuring out how to record the podcast or even for this interview, trying to figure out how to make this one mic work for both of us while we're still being videoed, while we're in the same room by different devices, or whether it's like, I can't figure out how to like put a tripod together, or, I mean, it's crazy how your brain works to me. And to me, whenever I think of what math is about, I think of you. I think it's about teaching somebody the skills they need to be able to creatively problem solve in any circumstance. Not teaching someone how to put together a tripod, but teaching somebody how to be able to look at any problem from a variety of angles so that they can solve any problem. And I really wonder, like, have you ever considered that your ability to do that is a math skill? Oh my God, I'm coming up with such good questions. Look, I'm stumping you.
You are a professional. Well,
like before this podcast, would you have considered that a math skill?
Probably not explicitly. I wouldn't say that it would be math. I wouldn't think of, and I'm trying to decide if I think now.
Oh yeah, sorry.
I think problem solving is a component of math in general. But yeah, this is getting into the semantics of what is math. And so you can say math is problem solving. You can say, like some of the guests in recent seasons have said, that math is pattern recognition, and you can draw a parallel between pattern recognition and problem solving. So there's definitely a lot of overlap. Yeah, probably listening to your conversations and to you and other educators dive so deeply into what is education, how do kids learn, how do we transfer learning and knowledge to students. I probably wouldn't have thought so deeply about that kind of thing. But yes, I definitely think that problem solving and math are intertwined.
So the other really interesting thing, I think, is that you're not an educator. You're not a math educator. I would imagine that before starting this podcast, you were like, how much is there really to talk about in math education? Like, you go and teach math. Am I right? Like, and where I'm going with this, just to give you the full framing of the question, is I really am so curious. Like, now that you've seen me behind the scenes, and like you've heard all of these conversations, and you've heard about all of the like crazy math wars on social media, yes. I'm wondering how your perception of math education has changed over the past, 4 years.
Well, one thing that popped to mind, I've been through a lot of different education. Like, I did a bachelor's, and then I've also done a master's. So I'm very curious about academia, and I like learning just about how the world works. And I enjoyed learning about the academic world. And then also it occurs to me that my mom was a high school teacher. That's and right. The language department head or something for many, many years. So I also have that kind of perspective of just knowing what her life as a teacher was like, both in terms of education and then also the social and political influences on teachers and on education in terms of the world.
Say more.
Well, just like just budget cuts from provincial governments in Ontario that greatly affected her work and life and her fellow teachers, and just knowing the kind of stress that politics can impose onto the education system. So so I think that all that kind of stuff is just part of me as well. And so that's why I think I can relate to and find interest in all the conversations that you have with your guests about, because the same things that happened 20, 30 years ago have been happening in the last few years. And that does lead to the math wars, which it's crazy. And it is really interesting that education is such a hot button topic, or it's like to observe how heated things get is pretty crazy, where instead of people, I mean, you and the people you talk to so far on the podcast are having very constructive conversations, but in other spaces, it's just yelling at each other or like tearing each other down and it becomes very political and argumentative as opposed to problem solving oriented.
Do you have more or less hope in our ability to change math education after listening to all these stories?
Deep sigh.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, are you kind of like, oh my God, this is way more of a mess than I thought it was? Or are you like, oh, look, like all these people are really hopeful and wanting to do good work?
I guess more, because you do have a lot of really constructive conversations, and also knowing the feedback that we get as a podcast, just from teachers who email you to tell you how either an episode really impacted them, or when they see you at a conference, and then you get the feedback that they got so inspired and that they're going to bring these strategies and perspectives into their classroom. Then you have to have a hopeful perspective that those little changes, even just one teacher treating one student better, that improves the world, even if it's not like the entire overhaul of the education system or something. So it is hopeful to know that you and your colleagues and these guests are doing this kind of work. I think it still is very easy to be cynical just because the way other people argue, but then also that I do feel like this is just like any other field or part of life.
Yeah, like I always wonder this. I'm like, is this like, when I think about, I'm like, oh my God, math education is so crazy. I'm like, but hold on, this is just like the music industry we're in. Isn't it really the exact same thing? But is it?
That's different. No, because I think it's anything in which politics is involved.
Right.
So because politicians can weaponize these kinds of things in the effort to get elected or stay elected or to sway voters. And so like whatever, without being partisan or whatever, it's like you can get one party or something saying, oh, it's this other party's fault that whatever test scores are low or something. And then it just becomes like with so many other things that are impacted by politics, it just becomes a sport. And then you've got the people who support one party against the people who support the other party, as opposed to those people really wanting to learn, well, what does the research say about this teaching method, or about test scores, or about time tests or something? Like, I mean, that's something as an engineer that I have always been drawn to. And I feel like it is part of problem solving for me, is evidence-based strategies or something like that. But I also recognize that many people don't think like an engineer, or maybe don't have a STEM background where
I feel like they just don't. I'm kind of speaking for myself here in a way of like, I don't think people don't care. I think there's so much information. There's so much overwhelm of like, how do I find actual research and dig into the fact and make sure it's not fake news, that people just can't, like, they just go with something.
Yeah.
It's not that I don't think people care, honestly. I think that even you have the people who care about evidence-based and they find evidence, and I'm using air quotes, from like some fucked up source and don't even know that it's like fake news or don't care. Or B, they're like, yeah, I would love some evidence, but like I can't possibly like figure out where to dig and find actual evidence. So I'm just going to trust this person who I trust, who happens to be this politician because I'm on their side.
Yeah, it's tough. It's very hard because you talk about, I mean, what you were just describing was a combination of media literacy and numeracy.
Yeah.
And it is very difficult. I mean, I think about this. I think about this in terms of society as a whole, but working with you on this podcast has helped me to think about it in terms of math education, which is very interesting. I mean, when the COVID stuff came out and like you've got science communicators trying to explain what's actually happening. And then, I mean, even me who is an engineer and understands stuff, it was so
Who
confusing.
is an engineer and understands stuff?
Yeah, that's on my diploma. Bachelor of Engineer and guy who knows some stuff. Honors. Yeah, even for me, a genius. It was a gifted genius with multiple degrees. It was very confusing. Is my point.
Confusing.
And so I think about with these things about politicians using these issues as kind of political wedges. It's very frustrating because I feel for the people who are swayed by these arguments because they don't have the training to understand a statistical analysis or this whole the anti-science movement or something, or like that's what I was saying before, how I found it interesting, like doing my master's. I didn't do a research-based master's, but I was exposed to other colleagues in my group who were doing that. So I could see all that stuff and I could see how things are peer reviewed and understand what is a meta-analysis and understand how, and I also I don't understand statistics now. I couldn't do statistical analysis now, but I took a course back then. And so I have a foundational understanding of how statistics works. So then that gives me confidence in what a scientific paper says now. Whereas someone who doesn't have that kind of training, it's like, no wonder someone who doesn't have a STEM background, like having blind faith in science is hard for a lot of people if you don't really know how it works. And it's hard to, I don't know. Is this making sense?
It 100% makes sense. And the thing is, I'm just listening to being like, in a way, politicians are weaponizing privilege because you're saying all these amazing things, but I'm listening to you and I'm like, wow, you have this STEM background and you have these degrees. And like, I'm not saying this is the only way, but it's like so much of that comes, like there is a privileged position in being able to obtain all these degrees and get all of this education. Like we already know that. So I'm like, it's not like politicians don't know what they're doing or like these like fake news movements don't know what they're doing. They know that many people have no idea how to interpret stats. So like they're kind of weaponizing our society's innumeracy. And I do think that many people, like advertisers included, know what they're doing. They know that people don't understand the math behind a lot of the science, and they're going to use that to their advantage to sell whatever they want to sell, whether that's a new curriculum or policy or product. Okay, I think we should.
No, I think, yes. Well, we can wrap up because I think your point about privilege is very fair and apt. And I think it can also be, a big aspect of the social divide in general that politicians can then kind of amplify or feed off of is this idea that the word uneducated can sound so insulting. Yeah. And you can, because it's so easy to like look at the other side, look at someone who thinks the opposite you or votes for the other person and think like, oh, they're stupid. They don't get, but I don't think everyone feels that way, but there's definitely some people who are like, that person, how can they vote for such and such? They must be so dumb. Yeah. But my point more so was like being uneducated. I think it's not necessarily like a dirty word or pejorative or something. No. It is a fact. And I guess that rolls into why all your conversations about equity and diversity and taking into account class and privilege and stuff like that in education system is so important because if people are educated to understand these kinds of things, then they have the foundational understanding of how society works and like that basic level of literacy and numeracy and media literacy. But that's a lot of work that the school system has to do.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I was thinking like, this whole rant started with the math wars. And that one thing I've wanted to do is be the Joe Rogan of math education. I've thought of us doing a season where I invite guests on specifically that I don't technically agree with, right? Just thinking of the math wars, obviously there are sides, and I really do believe that there's so much common ground that is never discussed because people want to polarize and everyone is like, you're either on this side or that. And I've thought of having this season where I specifically bring on those who I disagree with. That's what I mean about Joe Rogan. I mean that he's not very discerning with what guests.
No, I get it.
I wouldn't say I'm a fan. I'm just saying that format. What do you think of that idea? Should I do that?
Well, it was, I mean, I can advise you about how to structure an episode, about what order of guests we should put the season in. I can help you.
Are you going to answer?
Copy edit the intros and outros. Joking aside, I think it's an interesting idea. I think it's hard. It can be risky with some guests, but I do think there's 100% great value in two people who don't agree with each other actually
having a conversation. Okay, so if you're listening to this right now and you have a suggestion for a guest I should bring on that I probably won't agree with or that you don't agree with, I don't know, just give us some suggestions. Tweet them at us.
But even the last season when you interviewed Chris Luzniak, the Debate Bath podcast.
That guy is so controversial.
Yes.
Just kidding. He's great.
Yes.
But what about him? Oh, the debate podcast. Oh, about debate.
Yeah, let me finish.
I thought you were going to talk shit about Chris. I was like, David.
No, he's great.
He's the nicest.
Yeah.
Chris, we love you.
Are you done? So in that episode, he was talking about the value of people talking, even if they don't agree with each other. And it's one thing if you've got someone who's just out there and is clearly intentionally inflammatory and just trying to like get clicks or likes or whatever's, that's a different story. But if it's just like, if you can get a sense that someone is arguing about something because they care.
Yes.
Ultimately.
Just a different point of view.
Yeah, not just because they're argumentative. Then yeah, I think that there is in education and in all aspects of life. I do think people, and this is, I think, just the perils of social media. It has rewarded arguments.
True.
And people yelling at each other.
Honestly, I don't know how, but it's been 35 minutes. So I know you would be telling me to wrap it up. And I know what people really want to know is, what is it like working with me?
Okay, well, I mean, we are your best friends, and we know each other very well, and so high level, it is a lot of fun.
Oh, Dave.
Well, yeah, I wouldn't spend this much time working on something if I didn't enjoy working with you on it, and if I didn't feel like the work itself was important. I think I've always been fulfilled and honored to be a part of it because I know that there's a lot of listeners and teachers who follow you and colleagues and stuff who are very touched by the conversations that you have and by your own perspective.
Okay. Next.
You weren't fishing for a compliment?
No, this is a little much. Now people are going to think that I asked you to say all this nice stuff about me. Next question.
You didn't. I'm volunteering. I was just trying to be nice.
Thank you so much. I love it. The next question is, as you know, I have written a book called Math Therapy.
What?
And it's out, and I want...
So now you want me to say the scripted pitch for how great the book is? That we planned, that you told me?
No, but the reason we're recording these bonus episodes is because I wrote a book, and normally we only do one season a year, but I really wanted to do a little something to celebrate because it's been such a huge milestone, and it all started with this podcast. And the question I want to ask you is, do you think it is dumb that I wrote a book called Math Therapy?
Do I think it's dumb? She says on the eve of her releasing said book. Do I think it's dumb that you... No, I don't think it's dumb that you wrote a book.
But what do you think? Are you like, what's the vibe?
Well, the vibe... Okay, but I also just also to tackle... Because you interrupted me, which is not a very nice thing for an interviewer to do. I mean, I was about to compliment how great and talented and natural a host you are. But I would, in terms of, do I enjoy working on the podcast, or would I also, part of it is it's a lot of fun. Technically, I like editing. I like assembling it. I like putting the whole thing together. It's fun. So it's another reason, just for if there are any budding podcast producers out there.
Oh my God, you're saying this for the budding podcast producers.
You never know. Go start a podcast. Pick a topic. Just hit record. And then spend the next few hours just stressing over waveforms and whether or not it recorded, and if there's any background noise, or maybe the fridge started humming, and then you've got this little in the background. Okay, what was the question?
My book.
So I think it's great that you wrote a book. Why would I think it's dumb? I think it's a natural extension of all of your work. I mean, you've got your whole life experience that has led you to your perspective on math education. You've worked closely with teenagers and students for many, many years. You're kind of like you are a teenager in your brain. And you've developed all of these workshops and seminars that you bring to conferences around the world and share these insights and inspirations to teachers to take them to their classroom. So it is very logical that all of that stuff and the stuff that you talk about in the podcast all can be neatly packaged in a bright pink book.
And just to be clear, the book isn't like a bunch of stories of the podcast. It's how to actually take math therapy and use it in your classrooms. It's like 5 steps to heal math trauma in the classroom. And it's like how to do it, because I feel like in the podcast, we learned about all these stories, and I started realizing, oh my gosh, like math trauma is literally everywhere, and it comes in so many different ways, shapes, forms, sizes, this and that. But also realizing that what we do through the podcast, this idea of math therapy, is there are actual practical applications and now I'm just promoting the book, but I'm just going to do it for 1 minute. The point is, the book is actually just 200 pages of tips and tricks and strategies and templates and resources of how to actually take math therapy and turn it into a culture in your classroom. At the end, I'm done. David,
which is valuable and a great resource that teachers will have.
It's out now. Go order it.
It's great that you wrote a book.
David, it is time for the 2 final questions I ask every guest.
I was not anticipating this, and I should have.
Are you ready?
I guess so.
What do you say to someone who says, but David, I'm just not a math person? You're so triggered.
Well, it'll sound too easy, but I think the catchiest and most succinct and accurate way to put it is that there is no such thing as a math person. I agree with your tagline.
Why are you saying it in that tone of voice?
I guess I just have resigned myself to not being able to on the spot come up with something original. And I just am disappointed in myself.
But you did great. Don't be so hard on yourself. Just in case anyone was wondering, David is a Taurus, which explains basically this whole interview. Final question. If you could change one thing about math education, what would it be?
Get the politicians out of there. Am I right?
David, it has been, I think that's it. I think we're done.
Yeah.
That was actually the biggest treat. I didn't ask you any of the questions I had planned.
Just like every other interview you do.
Guys, David Kochberg, the man, the myth, the legend, the Taurus. You're wonderful. Thank you so much for letting me do this. I know it was uncomfortable for you to be in front of the camera, in front of the mic. We all had a great time, and now is that time where I'm going to bid you farewell.
How are you going to do it?
Peace out.
Bye. Thanks for having me.
Okay, wow, that was a real roller coaster ride, even for me. And I do feel I need to say 3 things to end this episode. The first is, we are not conspiracy theorists. The second is, I'm actually really serious, and I do want you guys to send me your controversial guest ideas. And by controversial, I mean like people you think I might not agree with, because I want to talk to them. I want to hear the other side. And number 3, well, this one is just a shameless plug. Order my book. Or at least check it out by heading to matththerapy.com. Honestly, thank you guys all so much for being along for the wild ride that is this podcast. And you know what? Send David some love, because he did a great job, and he was really nervous. You know, it takes a lot to go from being behind the scenes to in front of the camera. And just shout out to David. We love you, boo. And I know what people really want to know is what is it like working with me?
I mean, I also have to say that this entire time I have just been stressed about whether or not the mic is even working.
How would I know?
Exactly. That's it. We're not going to know until we finish. Until we press stop. We're not going to know.
Like the time thing says it's recording.
Yeah, sure. But what is time but a construct? Okay.
Anyways,
what was your question?